This is now the 9th part of The Alchemist, a book I will read for you in ASMR style. RSMR Katz. For the ultimate feeling of this YouTube clip, put the headphones in your ear. It is absolutely worth it to hear what I have to tell you in crystal clear sound, because this is a high quality recording. So see the difference when you put your headphones in. We are now at part 9 of the book The Alchemist, and I think it's now the last part, because then the book is at an end. Make sure that you listen to part 1 till 8, or till 9, till yet, that you fully understand the beauty of this book and are able to listen between the lines. It is written by Paulo Coelho. If you like what you see here, feel free to follow, subscribe, click on the notification bell and comment, because everything helps to let this channel grow. So let's go. The first day passed. There was a Maya battle nearby, and a number of wounded were brought back to the camp. The dead soldiers were replaced by others. And life went on. Death doesn't change anything, the boy thought. You could have died later on, a soldier said to the body of his companions. You could have died after peace had been declared, but in any case, you're going to die. At the end of the day, the boy went looking for the alchemist who had taken his falcon out into the desert. I still have no idea how to turn myself into the wind, the boy repeated. Remember what I told you, the world is only the visible aspect of God, and that what alchemy does it so bring a spiritual perfection into contact with the material plane. What are you doing? Feed my falcon. If I'm not able to turn myself into the wind, we're going to die, the boy said. Why feed your falcon? You're the one who may die, the alchemist said. I already know how to turn myself into wind. On the second day, the boy climbed to the top of a cliff near the camp. The essentials allowed him to go. They had already heard about the sorcerer who could turn himself into wind, and they didn't want to go near him. In any case, the desert was impassable. He spent the entire afternoon of the second day looking out over the desert and listening to his heart. The boy knew that the desert scented his fear. The boy spoke the same language. On the third day, the chief met with his officers. He called the alchemist to the meeting and said, "Let's go. See the boy who turns himself into wind." "Let's," the alchemist answered. The boy took them to the cliff where he had been on the previous day. He told them all to be seated. "It's going to take a while," the boy said. "We are in no hurry," the chief answered. We are men of the desert. The boy looked at the horizon. There were mountains in distances, and there were dunes, rocks, and plants that instead on living where survival seemed impossible. There was a desert that he had wandered for so many months. Despite all the time, he knew only a small part of it. Within the small part, he had found an Englishman, caravans, tribal wars, and an oasis with 50,000 palm trees and 300 wells. "What do you want here today?" the desert asked him. "Didn't you spend enough time looking at me yesterday?" "Somewhere you are holding the person I love," the boy said. "So when I look out of over your sand, I'm also looking at her. I want to return to her, and I need you to help me so that I can turn myself into wind." "What is love?" the desert asked. "Love is the falcon's flight over your sands, because for him you are a green field from which he always returns with game. He knows your rocks, your dawns, and your mountains, and you are generous to him. The falcon's peak carries a bit of myself," the desert said. "For years I care for his game, feeding it with the little water that I have, and then I show him where the game is. And one day, as I enjoy the fact that his game thrives on my surface, the falcon dives out of the sky and takes away what I've created." "But that's why you created the game in the first place," the boy answered, "to nourish the falcon. And the falcon then nourishes man, and eventually man will nourish your sense, where the game will once again flourish. That's how the world goes. So it's that what love is. Yes, that is what love is. It's what makes the game become the falcon become man, and man in his turn the desert. It's what turns lead into gold and makes the gold return to the earth." "I don't understand what you're talking about," the desert said, "but you can at least understand that somewhere in your sense there is a woman waiting for me, and that's why I have to turn myself into the wind." The desert didn't answer him for a few moments. Then I told him, "I give you my sense to help the wind to blow, but alone I can't do anything. You have to ask for help from the wind." A breeze began to blow. The tribesmen watched the boy from a distance, talking among themselves in a language that the boy couldn't understand. The alchemist smiled. The wind approached the boy and touched his face. It knew of the boy's talk with the desert because the winds know everything. They blow across the world without a birthplace and with no place to die. "Help me," the boy said. "One day you carried the voice of my love one to me." "Who taught you to speak the language of the desert and the wind?" "My heart," the boy answered. The wind has many names. In the part of the world it was called the Sikoro because it brought moisture from the oceans to the east. In the distant land the boy came from they called it Laventa because they believed that it brought with it scent of the desert and the screams of the Moorish wars. Perhaps in the places beyond the pastures where sheep lived, men thought that the wind came from Andalusia. But actually the wind came from no place at all, nor did it go to any place. That's why it was stronger than the desert. Someone might one day plant trees in the desert and even raise sheep there, but never would they harness the wind. "You can't be the wind," the wind said. "We are too different, very different." "That's not true," the boy said. "I learned the alchemist's secrets in my travels. I have inside me the winds, the deserts, the ocean, the stars, and everything created in the universe. We were all made by the same hand, and we have the same soul." I want to be like you, able to reach every corner of the world, cross the seas, blow away the sand that cover my treasure, and carry the voice of the woman I love. I heard what you were talking about the other day with the alchemist, the wind said. He said that everything has its own personal legend, but people can turn themselves into the wind. Just teach me to be the wind for a few moments, the boy said, so you and I can talk about the limitless possibilities of people in the winds. The wind's curiosity was aroused, something that had never happened before. It wanted to talk about these things, but it didn't know how to turn a man into the wind. And look how many things the wind already knew how to do. It created desert, sank ships, felled entire forests, and blew through cities filled with music and strange noises. It felt that it had no limits, yet here was a boy, saying that there were other things the wind should be able to do. This is what we call love, the boy said, seeing that the wind was close to granting what he requested. When you are loved, you can do anything in creation. When you are loved, there's no need at all to understand what's happening, because everything happens within you, and even men can turn themselves into wind, as long as the wind helps, of course. The wind was a proud being, and it was becoming irritated with what the boy was saying. It commenced to blow harder, raising the desert sand, but finally it had to recognize that even making its way around the world, it didn't know how to turn a man into the wind, and it knew nothing about love. In my travels around the world, I've often seen people speaking of love and looking toward to heavens, the wind said, furious at having to acknowledge its own limitations. Maybe it's better to ask heaven. Well, then help me to do that, the boy said. Fill this place with sandstorm so strong that it blots off the sun. Then I can look to heaven without blinding myself. So the wind blew with all its strength, and the sky was filled with sand. The sun was turned into golden dusk. At the camp, it was difficult to see anything. The men of the desert were already familiar with that wind. They called it the simum. And it was worse than a storm at sea. The horses cried out, and all their weapons were filled with sand. On the heights, one of the commanders turned to the chief and said, "Maybe we had better end this." They could rawly see the boy. Their faces were covered with the blue clothes, and their eyes showed fear. "Let's stop this," another commentator said. "I want to see greatness of Allah," the chief said with respect. "I want to see how a man turns himself into wind." But he made a mental note of the names of the two men who had experienced the fear. As soon as the wind stopped, he was going to remove them from their comments, because true men of the desert are not afraid. "The wind told me that you know about love," the boy said to the sun. "If you know about love, you must also know about the soul of the world, because it's made of love." "From where I am," the sun said, "I can see the soul of the world. It communicates with my soul. And together we cause the plants to grow and the sheep to seek." From where I am, and I am long way from the earth, I learned how to love. I know that if I came even a little bit closer to earth, everything there would die, and the soul of the world would no longer exist, so we complement each other. And we want each other, and I give it life and warmth, and it gives me some reason for living. "So you know about love," the boy said. "And I know the soul of the world, because we have talked at great lengths to each during this endless trip through the universe. It tells me that its greatest problem is that, up until now, only the minerals and vegetables understand that all the things are one. that there's no need for iron to be the same as copper, or copper the same as gold. Each performs its own exact function as a unique being, and everything would be a symphony of a piece if the hand that wrote all this had stopped a filthy day of creation. But there was a sixth day, the sun went on. You are wise because you observed everything from a distance. But you don't know about love. If there hadn't been a 60th day, man would not exist. Copper would always be just copper, and least just lead. It's true that everyone has a personal legend, but one day that personal legend will be realized. So each thing has to transform itself into something better and to acquire a new personal legend until someday the soul of the world becomes one thing only. The sun thought about that and decided to shine more brightly. The wind, which was enjoying the conversation, started to blow with a greater force so that the sun would not blind the boy. This is why alchemists exist, the boy said, so that everyone will search for his treasure, find it, and then want to be better than he was in his former life. Lead will play its role until the world has no further need for lead, and then lead will have to turn itself into gold. That's what the alchemists do. They show that when we strive to become better than we are, everything around us becomes better too. Well, why did you say that I don't know about love? The sun asked the boy. Because it's not love to be static like the desert, nor is the love to roam the world like the wind. And it's not love to see everything from distance like you do. Love is a force that transforms and improves the soul of the world. When I first reached through, I thought the soul of the world was perfect, but later I could see that it was like other aspects of creation and had its own passion and wars. It is we who nourish the soul of the world, and the world we live in then will be either better or worse, depending on whether we became better or worse. And that's where the power of love comes in, because when we love, we always strive to become better than we are. So what do you want of me? The sun asked. I want you to help me to turn myself into the wind, the boy answered. Nature knows me as the wisest being in creation, the sun said, but I don't know how to turn you into the wind. Then whom I should ask? The sun thought for a minute. The wind was listening closely, and he wanted to tell every corner of the world that the sun's wisdom had limitations, that it was unable to deal with this boy who spoke the language of the world. Speak to the hand that wrote all, said the sun. The wind screamed with delight and blew harder than ever. The tents were being blown from their ties to the earth, and the animals were being freed from their tethers. On the cliff the men clutched at each other's as they sought to keep from being blown away. The boy turned to the hand that wrote all. As he did so, he sensed that the universe had fallen silent, and he hesitated not to speak. A current of love rushed from his heart, and the boy began to pray. It was a prayer that he had never said before, because it was a prayer without words or pleas. His prayer didn't give thanks for his sheep having found new pasture. It didn't ask that the boy be able to sell more crystal, and it didn't beseech that the woman he had met continue to await his return. In the silence, the boy understood that the desert, the wind, and the sun were always trying to understand the signs written by the hand, and were seeking to follow of their paths, and to understand what had been written on a single emerald. He saw that omens were scattered throughout the earth and in space, and that there was no reason of signification attached to their appearance. He could see that not the desert, nor the winds, not the sun, nor people knew why they had been created, but that the hand had a reason for all of this, and that only the hand could perform miracles or transform the sea into a desert, or a man into the wind, because only the hand understood that it was a larger design that had moved the universe to the point at which 6 days of creation had evolved into a masterwork. The boy reached through the soul of the world and saw that it was a part of the soul of God, and he saw that the soul of God was his own soul, and a boy could perform miracles. The simon blew that day as it had never blown before. For generations thereafter, the Arab re-encountered the legend of a boy who had turned himself into wind, almost destroying a military camp in defense of the most powerful chief in the desert. When Simon seized the blow, everyone looked to the place where the boy had been, but he was no longer there. He was standing next to a sand-covered sandhill on the far side of the camp. The men were terrified at the sorcery, but there were 2 people who were smiling. The alchemist, because he had found his perfect disguise, and the chief, because the disguise had understood the glory of God. The following day, the general bade the boy and the alchemist farewell and provided them with an escort party to accompany them as far as they chose. They rode for the entire day. Toward the end of the afternoon, they came upon a Epilogue monastery. The alchemist dismounted and told the escort they could return to the camp. "From here on, you will be alone," the alchemist said. "You are only 3 hours from the pyramids." "Thank you," said the boy. "You taught me the language of the world. I only invocate what you already knew." The alchemist knocked on the gate of the monastery. A monk dressed in black came to the gates. They spoke for a few minutes in the Coptic tongue, and the alchemist bade the boy enter. "I asked him to let me use the kitchen for a while," the alchemist smiled. They went to the kitchen at the back of the monastery. The alchemist lighted the fire, and the monk brought him some lead, which the alchemist placed in an iron pan. When the lead had become liquid, the alchemist took from his pouch the strange yellow egg. He scraped from it silver as thin as hair, wrapped it in wax, and added to the pan, in which let him melt it. The mixture took on a reddish color, almost the color of blood. The alchemist removed the pan from the fire and set it aside to cool. As he did so, he talked with the monk about the terrible wars. "I think they are going to last for a long time," he said to the monk. The monk was irritated. The caravans had been stopped at Giza for some time, waiting the war's end. "But God wills be done," the monk said. "Exactly," answered the alchemist. When then pan had cooled, the monk and the boy looked at the desert. The lead had tired into the shape of the pan, but it was no longer lead, it was gold. "Will I learn to do so someday?" the boy asked. "This was my personal legend, not yours," the alchemist answered. "But I wanted to show you that it was possible." They returned to the gates of the monastery. There the alchemist separated the disc into 4 parts. "This is for you," he said, holding one of the parts out to the monk. "It's for your generosity to the pilgrims." "But this payment goes well beyond my generosity," the monk responded. "Don't say that again. Life might be listening and give you less than next time." The alchemist turned to the boy. "This is for you, to make up for what you have gave to the general." The boy was about to say that it was much more than he had given the general, but he kept quiet because he had heard what the alchemist said to the monk. "And this is for me," said the alchemist, keeping one of the parts, "because I have to return to the desert where there are tribal wars." He took the fourth part and handed it to the monk. "This is for the boy. If he ever needs it. But I'm going in search of my treasure," the boy said. "I'm very close to it now, and I'm certain you will find it," the alchemist said. "Then why this?" "Because you have already lost your saving twice. Once to the thief and once to the general. I'm an old superstitious Arab, and I believe in our proverbs. There's one that says everything happened once can never happen again. But everything that happened twice will surely happen a third time." They mounted the horses. "I want to tell you a story about dreams," said the alchemist. The boy brought his horse closer. "In ancient Rome, at the time of Emperor Tiberius, there lived a god-man who had 2 sons. One was in the military and had been sent to the most distant regions of the empire. The other son was a poet and delightful all Rome with a beautiful verse. One night the father had a dream. An angel appeared to him and told him that he had words of one of his sons would be learned and repeat throughout the world for all generations to come. The father woke from his dream grateful and crying because life was generous and had revealed to him something any father would be proud to know. Shortly thereafter, the father died as he tried to save a child who was about to be crushed by the wheels of a chariot. Since he had lived his entire life in a manner that was correct and fair, he went directly to heaven, where he met the angel that had appeared in his dream. "You were always a good man," the angel said to him. "You lived your life in a loving way and died with dignity. I can now grant you any wish you desire." "Life was good to me," the man said. "When you appeared in my dream, I felt that all my efforts had been rewarded because my son's poem will be read by men for generations to come. I don't want anything for myself, but any father would be proud of the fame achieved by one whom he had cared for his child and educated as he grew up. Sometime in the distant future, I would like to see my son's words." The angel touched the man's shoulder, and they were both projected far into the future. They were in an immense setting surrounded by thousands of people speaking a strange language. The man wept with happiness. "I knew that my son's poems were immortal," he said to the angel through his tears. "Can you please tell me which of my son's poems these people are repeating?" The angel came closer to the man and with a tenderness led him to a bench nearby where they sat down. "The verse of your son, who was the poet, were very popular in Rome. Everyone loved them and enjoyed them, but when the reign of Tiberius ended, his poems were forgotten. The words you are hearing now are those of your son in the military." The man looked at the angel in surprise. "Your son went to serve at a distant place and became a sentinel. He was just any good. One afternoon on his 7th fell and appeared that he would die. Your son had heard of Rabbi who was able to cut illness, and he rode over for the days and days to search of this man. Along the way, he learned that the man he was seeking was the Son of God. He met others who had been cured by him, and they instructed your son into the man's teachings, and so despite the fact that he was Roman concerned, he converted to their faith. Shortly, therefore, he reached the place where the man he was looking forward was visiting. He told the man that one of his servants was gravely ill, and the rabbi made ready to go to his house with him. But the centurion was a man of faith, and looking into the eyes of Rabbi, he knew that he was surely the presence of Son God. "And this is what your son said," the angel told the man. These are the words he said to the rabbi at the point, and they have never been forgotten. My lord, I am not worthy that you should come under my roof, but only speak a word and my servant will be healed. The alchemist said, no matter what he does, every person on earth plays a central role in the history of the world, and normally he doesn't know it. The boy smiled. He had never imagined the question about life would be such important to a shepherd. Goodbye, the alchemist said. Goodbye, said the boy. The boy rode along through the desert for several hours, listening avidly to what his heart had to say. It was his heart that would tell him where the treasure was hidden. Where your treasure is, there also will be your heart, the alchemist had told him. But his heart was speaking of other things. With pride it told the story of a shepherd who had left his flock to follow the dream he had on 2 different occasions. It told of personal legend and of the many men who had wandered in search of distant lands or beautiful women confronting the people of the times with their personal notation. It spoke of journeys, discovery, books, and change. As he was about to climb yet another dun, his heart whispered, be aware of the place where you are, brought to tears. That's where I am, and that's where your treasure is. The boy climbed the dun slowly, a full moon rise against the starry sky. It had been a month since he had set forth for the oasis. The moonlight cast shadows through the dunes, creating the appearance of a rolling sea. It reminded the boy of the day when the horse had reared in the desert and he had to come to know the alchemist. And the moon fell on the desert silence and won a man's journey in search of treasure. When he reached to the top of the dune, his heart leaped. There, illuminated by the light of the moon and the brightness of the desert, stood the solemn, majestic pyramids of Egypt. The boy fell to his knees and wept. He thanked God for making him believe in his personal legend and for leading him to meet a king, a merchant, an Englishman, and an alchemist. And above all for his having met a woman of the desert who had told him that love would never keep man from his personal legend. If he wanted to, he could now return to the oasis, go back to Fatima and live his life as a simple shepherd. After all, the alchemist continued to live in the desert, even so he understood the language of the world and knew how to transform lead into gold. He didn't need to demonstrate his science and art to anyone. The boy told himself that the way toward realization, his own personal legend, he had learned all he needed to know and had experienced everything he might have dreamed of. But here he was at the point of finding his treasure, and he reminded himself that no project is complete until its objective had been achieved. The boy looked at the fallen sand around him and saw that where the tears had fallen, a separate beetle was scuttling through the sand. During this time in the desert, he had learned that in Egypt, the scarab beetle are a symbol of God. Another omen, the boy began to dig into the dune. As he did so, he thought of what a crystal merchant had once said, that anyone could build a pyramid in his backyard. The boy could see now that he couldn't do so if he placed stone upon stone for the rest of his life. Throughout the night, the boy dug at the place he had chosen, but found nothing. He felt weighed down by the centuries of time since the pyramids had been built. But he didn't stop. He struggled to continue digging as he fought the wind, which often blew the sand back into the evacuation. His hands were abrupted and exhausted, but he listened to his heart. It had told him to dig where his tears fell. As he was attempting to pull out the rocks he heard footsteps. Several figures approached him. Their backs were to the moonlight, and the boy could see neither their eyes nor their faces. "What are you doing here?" one of the figures demanded. Because he was terrified, the boy didn't answer. He had found where the treasure was and was frightened at what might happen. "We're refugees from the tribal wars and we need money," the other figure said. "What are you hiding there?" "I'm not hiding anything," the boy answered. But one of them seized the boy and yanked him back out of the hole. Another who was searching the boy's bags found a piece of gold. "There's gold," he said. The moon shone in the face of the Arab who had seized him, and in this man's eyes the boy saw death. "He's probably got more gold hidden in the ground." They made the boy continue digging, but he found nothing. As the sun rose, the man began to beat the boy. He was bruised and bleeding, his clothing was torn to shreds, and he felt that the death was near. "What good is money to you if you're going to die? It's not often that money can save someone's life," the alchemist has said. Finally, the boy screamed at the man, "I'm digging for treasure," and also his mouth was bleeding and swollen. He told his attackers that he had twice dreamed of treasure hidden near the pyramids. The man who appeared to be a leader of the group spoke to one of the other. "Leave him. He doesn't have anything else. He must have stolen this gold." The boy fell to the sand, nearly unconscious. The leader shook him and said, "We are leaving." But before they left, he came back to the boy and said, "You're not going to die. You will live, and you will learn that a man shouldn't be so stupid. 2 years ago, right here on this spot, I had to reinsert your dream too. I dreamed that I should travel to the fields of Spain and look for a ruined church where shepherds and their sheep slept. In my dream, there was a sycamore growing out of the ruined sacristy, and I was told that if I dug at the roots of the sycamore, I would find treasure. But I'm not so stupid as to cross the entire desert just because of recurring the deal." And they disappeared. The boy stood up shakily and looked once more at the pyramids. They seemed to laugh at him, and he laughed back, his heart bursting with joy, because now he knew where his treasure was. Epilogue. The boy reached a small abandoned church just as night was falling. The sycamore was still there in the sacristy, and the stars could still be seen through the half-destroyed roof. He remembered the time he had been there with his sheep. It had been a peaceful night, except for the dream. Now he was here not with his flock, but with Shovel. He sat looking at the sky for a long time. Then he took from his kidnap's bottle of wine and drank some. He remembered the night in the desert when he had that with the alchemist, as they looked at the stars and drank wine together. He thought of the many roads he had traveled and of the strange way God had chosen to show him his treasure. If he hadn't believed in the significance of recurrent dreams, he would not have met the gypsy woman, the king, the thief, or well, it's a long list. But the path was written in the omens, and there was no way it could go wrong, he said to himself. He fell asleep, and when he awoke, the sun was already high. He began to dig at the base of the sycamore. "You old sorcerer," the boy shouted up the sky. "You know the whole story. You even left a bit of gold at the monastery so I could go back to this church. The monk laughed when he saw me come back in the tatters. Could not you have saved me from that?" "No," he heard a voice on the wind say. "If I had told you, you wouldn't have seen the pyramids. They're beautiful, aren't they?" The boy smiled and continued digging. Half an hour later, his shovel had something solid. An hour later, he had before him a chest of Spanish gold coins. There were also precious stones, gold musk adorned with the red and white feathers, and stone starches embayed with jewels. The spoils of a conquest that the country had long ago forgotten, and that some conquerors had failed to tell his children about. The boy out Urim and Thummim from his bag. He had used the 2 stones only once, one morning when he was at the marketplace. His life and his past had always provided him with enough omens. He placed Urim and Thummim in the chest. They were also a part of his new treasure because they were a reminder of the old king, whom he would never see again. It's true. Life really is generous to those who possess their personal legend, the boy thought. Then he remembered that he had to get the tarifa so he could give 1/10 of his treasure to the gypsy woman as he had promised. Oh, those gypsies are really smart, he thought. Maybe it was because they moved around so much. The wind began to blow again. It was the lavender, the wind that came from Africa. It didn't bring with it the smell of the desert, nor the threat of Mauritian vision. Instead, it brought the scent of a perfume he knew well, and the touch of a kiss that came from far away, slowly until it rested in his lips. The boy smiled. It was the first time she had done that. "I'm coming, Fatima," he said. This was the book The Alchemist from Paulo Coelho. I'm really not believing in the story of God and Jesus. I'm not a Christian, so this is a little bit interrupting for me, but when I see away from the Christian history and see God as the overall in this story, then I can be kind of okay with it. I have to say it's a beautiful book, very, very deep with reading between the lines, and it gives a certain strength and a very warm feeling while reading it, what I really, really like. I like books for giving you joy and positive tingles and let you feel comfort in whatever you do and understand the beauty of writing. I hope that you liked the book the same as I did, and I hope that you can take it deep in your heart and understand every word who was there to read between the lines. Maybe you feel now that you came to a new strength, and even so, feel free to read it by yourself or listen to all the other parts to enjoy The Alchemist in their full glory. My name is ASMR Katz, and I'm happy that you are part of my ASMR journey. Feel free to follow, subscribe, and click on the notification bell. And let me know in the comments if you want to let me read another good book. Also, check out all the other books and episodes I have in stock for you. There's a lot to explore. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you are relaxed, and I wish you all the best for your future path.